Evening. This is the Rowley Finance Committee meeting, March 21st, 2018 at 7:20. Call the meeting to order. Remind everybody that we're being recorded, audio and video, and we're expecting a very short meeting tonight because we have donuts and a scheduled intermission. So let's begin the meeting by, we have a joint meeting with the Board of Water Commissioners. Need a motion by
I'll make a
the
motion
Finance
to,
Committee.
I'll make
Actually,
a,
we have to call a meeting to order first.
okay,
Call the meeting of
Okay.
the Water Board to order.
I'll make a motion that we open the water board meeting. Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
does it have to be roll call?
Yes.
When we go to do the
Oh,
joint one, we'll
oh,
do.
okay,
But
Yeah.
okay.
All right. Can you make a motion?
Make a
to-
motion that we go into a joint meeting with the finance, with the water board.
Commissioners, and I second that.
Okay.
And we do the roll call?
You have a roll call vote.
Okay. Hi, Sharon Emery.
Aye, Larry White.
I, Paul Jalbert.
Aye, Peterson Solo.
I make a motion that the water board open a joint meeting with the finance committee. Seconded.
all those in favor, signify by a roll call vote.
Aye, John Manning. Aye, Bernard Cullum.
I, Mark Emery. We
Okay.
are in joint session.
All right. So let us begin. Opening salvo.
Okay. As you've probably seen, we've done a lot of changes to the budget. Bernie's got an overview here. I'll let him start off by going through that, and we'll answer any questions you have.
Right, does that make sense?
Yes.
Right, so, just as Mark indicated, when we picked up after the change in, after the leadership left, last superintendent left, and we came to the budget, we had to make a decision about whether we were going to try and decipher everything that had happened in the past, or we were essentially going to start from scratch. Given, my read of the situation was that the only way really to proceed was to start from scratch and to essentially build the budget up from the very basic elements. Fortunately, Rob Spinazzi and Bob Gray pitched in and provided an enormous amount of information, and they actually scrubbed through a lot of the detailed line items in the areas that we really don't have a line of sight to, which are the maintenance costs. The litmus test there is that they came in with dramatic reductions. They were uncovering all kinds of things which had been either misstated or misallocated, all kinds of things which essentially justified the fact that we really should start from a zero-based budget, because that's the only way they could. They knew what the operation was about, they knew what they needed to do their job, and therefore they built it up from there. So my approach to this is, and in discussions with the board proceeded the same way, is to start from the revenue side, to try and get a handle on how much money that we may have, and then make sure that we come under that revenue number, essentially. So yes, the first thing is we estimated the revenue. There's a sheet in here that basically lays that out, how we estimated it. The estimation we tried to do is, rather than just taking what was in the budget last year as the estimated revenue, that struck me as being kind of strange, because we had more up-to-date measures. So the last sheet essentially tracks revenues, this sheet here, which you should have.
Nine of nine.
And so that shows a month-by-month build-up and comparison between 2016, 2017, and then 2018 up to the year to date. And so we use those numbers, in fact, to build an estimate for that we could then use for fiscal year 19. Mike, you have one missing sheet.
This is all I got.
Four copies for the board and
One comment about that, so you, because I noticed the bigger changes, just looking at this quickly, is from FY17 to FY18 is where the sudden, but you said that you started like with a zero base and you worked from there, but looking at the budget here,
which
The
one, which
larger-
number are you looking at?
well, I'm looking at the bottom total revenue amount of $2,377,487.
Yep.
I don't have my calculator in front of me to get that. That's probably about over 10-15% drop. And then there's not as much of a decrease from 18 to 19. 18 to 19 is probably about half of that, or less than half of that. So when you were saying,
Right.
3,000 is like 1%.
yeah. So, so you, basically you did, kind of use, well, because unless it's a coincidence that FY18 is where the largest changes were made, right? As opposed to,
I mean, you have to remember, back in FY17, that covered the drought years, and the numbers changed dramatically. And so as we came out of the drought year into 18, the revenue numbers are significantly lower. So you can see on this sheet, which is the sheet I used to essentially estimate.
When you put a water restriction on, that dramatically cuts into our revenue.
So if you look at July.
So if you don't use the water, you don't pay for it, and we don't get the money for it.
Fiscal year 2017, July, August, and September numbers, we had a drought. So in the first part of the drought, our revenues went through the roof because people were using water to water their lawns and fill their pools. And we benefited enormously. So you look at fiscal year 17, fiscal year 18, and you see a dramatic reduction in the revenue flows.
We changed behavior because of the restrictions. One, the drought publications, and also the regulations that, fines and, penalties for using water. And so we literally changed behavior and drove down water usage. The downside of that is that we took in less revenue. However, we also didn't produce as much water. So our costs went down. It wasn't quite a 1-to-1 ratio, but there wasn't.
but you're expecting the drought to continue then, basically.
No, we're expecting the behavior to continue. The drought, we hopefully will go back, because it was an abnormal event, so the usage should go back to a normal level. So people won't be watering their lawns as much, and they won't be filling their pools as much as they were in fiscal year 17, which is essentially 2000.
And
June, July, and August.
just as bad of a drought is if you get a lot of rain in the summer, because the people aren't watering their lawns and filling their pools because it's raining. So both extremes work the same way against revenue, so it's very hard to figure
What we're
that.
talking about in 2016 is like 2 years ago, right?
Fiscal year. So we've got the fiscal year.
We're talking the summer of 17, summer of 16. 16 was the extreme drought.
Right, but we also had a water ban
Yeah, the water.
last summer.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll probably have
Okay.
a water ban every year.
Yeah,
partly
right.
Because of the cubic feet flow in the Parker River.
Right.
But with the state issuing the drought warnings and whatnot, that kicks into penalties if you use water versus you get a little slap on the wrist during a water ban.
So you're saying that the severity of the 16 water ban or drought was worse than what it was last year?
Last year was
Yes.
kind of like a normal year.
Normally, yep.
So it was
Okay.
it's a much better.
A normal drought?
A normal year, a normal
Okay.
year to essentially establish what the likely revenues were.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we can estimate what the revenues are for fiscal year 2018, that's a better estimate going forward than trying to do 2017.
For an example, just so you understand how the drought affects it or how it's implemented. From April to September, according to our withdrawal permit from the DEP, if the flow drops below a certain level in Parker River, we have to put on a water ban.
Right.
That automatically comes off in September. According to our water withdrawal permit. That year of the drought, that didn't come off until after Christmas. Because the state, actually, they have meetings every month to decide on what's the severity of the drought, and they tell you what to do. And they told us that we had to continue with our water bans beyond the normal thing. So you're talking October, November, December, into January before, which we still had water bans on.
Right.
So it's a two-step process. I mean, the first time when the water ban comes on, you just can't water during the heat of the day.
Right.
But at night, and then first thing in the morning, you can water your lawns, you can fill your pool, you can do everything that you normally do. And that's why when you looked at 2017, we've got this huge amount of water being used in July, August, and September, because the total ban hadn't kind of dropped down quite yet. And then it dropped down, and then we had this other set of behavior where you couldn't do any outside watering at all, and we had the people with their own gardens coming before us and saying, how dare you stop us from growing our vegetables, etc.
Additionally, with this material and then the way we've gathered the information and the work that Bernie has led with Bob and Rob, we now have substantial data, bolus of information, if you will. When the plan first came online, it was kind of, yeah, that looks good. The next year, a little better, but we now have 3 years, so to be able to do intelligent extrapolation is there. We now have data where we can see 3 years and a trend, and tighten up the budget. And like the guys, Rob and Bob worked a lot with Bernie to really, I'll say, clean up the budget and be able to look at it and say, no, we don't spend money here. We can take those 4 off, but we need to add these 2. And the way they restructured it, it's just so much better structure.
Yeah.
Dennis, I think, would appreciate it, because I know he really tried to help last year. But I think Bernie really took it by the horns and drove us over the goal line with this. And it's a team effort too. But
The other thing too is we're gradually bringing on more employees so that our costs are going down as far as doing the distribution work too. We're not hiring a contractor as much as we were a couple of years ago when there was, nobody working. We hired one laborer and we're hoping to hire another one very shortly, that we're going to hopefully get them to be licensed operators, because it's so hard to find licensed operators.
Right.
That we really have not got the benefits or the pay scale to entice anybody away from any other town. Would say it actually happens the opposite way, is people get enticed away from us, but.
So how does the state, do they get measurements? How do they know, I mean, do they check each town and they know exactly,
There's certain points where they check, like it's Parker River, they have a flow that goes over the dam that's measured, and we can go online and it tells you what the flow rate is at Parker River.
it's 20 cubic feet per second. And actually, it was just we were waiting for the meeting to start. We're flashing up the announcement, and it actually said that when the Parker River goes to 20 cubic feet per second, the initial water bands will go in. So if you're watching, it's actually out there on the public announcements.
Right.
So
I just couldn't think of the number right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So anyway, so if we go on to the other revenues and how it came up with the estimate.
some hard numbers, but even then, I think they are conservative. So, for example, the rate discounts, they're set at 5%, even though we know on a year-over-year basis that the actual percent of discounts, the actual number of people who use the discount is less than you would think. It's about 80% of the people who are eligible for it. So, but we still go with using the 5% number because everybody could suddenly get wise and start using the discount. So that's why the number is essentially a 5% of the commitment rate.
Did you know that Penachuk, if you forget to take the discount, will give it to you? I had that happen to me one month. I forgot, I had it in on time, and I had paid more, and I got a credit.
Oh,
for the
right, so
extra.
if you pay more, yes, they will give
They
you,
gave-
they will
yeah,
give you credits. 'Cause-
They gave me the discount back on the next month.
So that's, we'll pass on the good news to Penachuk. So, yes, you don't have to, if you pay the full amount, they'll, in time,
Yeah.
then they'll automatically give you the
Discount.
discount. So the other big numbers in that, in the revenue side are essentially the commitment services, which is the number that's given, the revenue that's attached to new houses. If we add new services, they will, it's about $4,000 a new house if they pay in full. But we don't know how many new houses are coming in. I mean, we just don't know.
Yeah.
We don't even know this year. This year, year to date, the numbers are relatively small.
So where is that number on here?
It's called commitment service. And in
Commitment
fiscal year
service.
17,
Still the
But you
same,
have- you
same
have
place,
zero.
but zeros.
But you have zeros in 18,
Still
18 and 19.
17,
Fiscal
we had
year
61,
17,
they
there was
zeroed it out.
61,000. But we can't predict it.
so you, but, I mean, but it's not zero though.
Well, but we can't, so.
But-
This is a
prudent
prediction.
financial approach, you know, the prudent man theory in finance would be to put zero there, because it could be anywhere from zero to $100,000. And so from, again, from a prudent approach in the budget, we had 61,000 there once, and you look back, it's all over the map. And right now, and what Bernie just said, we have no idea, and this year's down, so we put it as zero. So are we gonna have a few extra thousand in that? Possibly. And if, you know, if it's consistent, you know, we lower rates on the hydrant rentals or something again, but it's
But don't you have like
a
numbers?
quantifiable number.
Numbers like, you know, like if you, you know, with the planning office, they know.
Yeah,
how
you can
many-
go to
they-
the
they know
planning
how many-
board and
They
see,
know how many houses are coming up, you know, they know, what houses are being built and what new developments are being built.
As long as
now.
it's
You
a
can say-
development that's true to a point, but they approve a development and let's say there's 50 houses.
Yeah,
Well, they may only put in 2 this year, 10 next year. That's how they build them.
There's been developments that are on the books, and
you know, for 10 years.
yeah, and I lived in one when I first moved here, and you know, it didn't get built out. And the last house got built a couple of years ago. I mean,
I know, because I inspect majority of them when they're new for fire alarms and stuff. And you never know. You can never tell how many inspections you're gonna do in a year, because you never know. Even if they pull a builder permit, they don't pay that money, the whole $4,000, until the house is complete, because we ran into people, we just asked for a $100 deposit now, a non-refundable one, and then when they're ready to get their occupancy permit, they have to pay the $4,000 fee, because we've run into people that have changed halfway through and decided to put a well in. And now
not to
we
build.
have to come up with a way of funding the $4,000 back out of the budget.
so in the past, we'd have to hold that, you just have that money in the budget. And so this way, by having a $100, you know, a fee.
It's an application fee, basically.
And when they're ready, you know, so we'll have everything ready so that when they do it, they'll pay us just in time versus us having to maintain on the books escrow money, if you will.
Right.
And that's a nightmare for us. And so this is a much cleaner, much more appropriate approach for contingent money, is the best way I describe it. We might get it, we might not. So.
I think it's definitely the case moving forward to kind of, now that I mean, I was surprised in fiscal year 18 that there was essentially zero revenue coming in from those are new services. But that gives us no basis for going forward. The basis that we've got is zero, not the previous year. The most recent numbers suggest that there's not much construction. Now, this spring, it may turn around and there may be a flow of new houses, and that will give us a number. And certainly, talking to the planning board and the building inspector, we should have a better estimate of that number. But I don't feel at this point there was a justification for putting a number in there, because if you'd asked me where that number comes from, I would just say, well,
Only thing I was thinking, like, we went back the last 10 years and just did an average then, but even I know that isn't really is.
It doesn't work that way. I mean, when I worked for the water department, they were doing, well, in the neighborhood that you live in now, on Hillside, we were doing new services. My first year I was there, I probably did 8 to 10 of them just on that road. But now there's no more land to build really on that road.
They built one house.
You know, and so you never know. And then there was projects going on all over the place because there was a building boom. Now it's kind of waned off, but then there's a lot of projects that are in the books, but they haven't been approved by the planning board yet. They've just been kind of talking to the planning board, and so you don't know. They could be 4 or 5 years down the road, or they could be next year for all you know. You don't know how the market's going to be, and they're going to decide to build the houses or not.
And like Bernie said, sometimes they put a well in. We have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, will you give me that water bottle next to you?
so the other big number on the revenue side is the hydrant rentals. And we went back and we estimated how much it actually costs us to maintain the hydrants, and given this situation with Triton and the situation with the rest of the town, we felt it was appropriate to not to treat the hydrant rentals as a source of revenue, but to treat it as a cost and cover that cost. And that's where the 14.4 number comes from. So all told, brings the projected revenue for fiscal year 19 to essentially 2.4 million, or $2,380,752.75, but don't hold me to the 75 cents.
The 76 you're going to hear about.
I was just going to say.
So it's
like
conservative,
760.
so we expect the revenue to be above that, because all of our estimates have been.
Right.
You have to estimate conservatively because you don't know. I mean, you don't know what the weather's going to be tonight.
That's true.
You know, so you don't know what it's going to do this summer. If it's extremely rainy or it's extremely dry, there goes our revenues down. If it's a normal, everybody's out watering their lawns and stuff, then the revenues are up.
So should we move on?
Yes. No, I mean, it's our job to make sure that you're doing a proper estimation, but as far as coming up with the numbers,
Right.
you're more qualified than we are.
So
And
I gave you my worksheet, so if you think that you guys can come up with a kind of a different, rather than straight lining, if you want something fancier and you want to do it, we're perfectly willing to consider.
No.
So I guess one of the questions I'd add, I mean, is this format work? I mean, do you just walk through the budget more, or do you have questions? How do you want to, you know, the one I did last year was a disaster, so I don't have much background other than, you know, what's the right way to do this with you? I mean, do you want to go through each line item in the budget, or do you want to just, do you have specific areas we should cover?
I think covering the main topics as far as, revenues,
Maintenance, for me, you know, 'cause of
expenses,
you
maintenance,
made the changes in maintenance. and everything.
large swings like that, and maybe just an update on personnel, because that seems to be an issue. We don't need to cover every line item.
Okay, so let's do the wages and salaries and then go on to Peter's request about the operating expenses. So, our commitment is to fill all the positions that we've got posted at the moment. So we've got 4 empty positions. We've got the superintendent, we've got two secondary operators, and we've got a secondary laborer. All of those positions have been okayed by the Board of Selection, but they're open at this point. The two secondary operator positions have been open for an extended period of time, and we've been looking. We thought we were looking vigorously before, but it turned out there had been no advertising. And once the state found that out, they insisted, and we agreed, that we needed to be more aggressive in terms of filling those positions. Because it's wearing on the two guys who are there, and they're carrying the full load. And we've been very fortunate with having Bob Walsh fill in as a part-time person. He takes the weekends, because otherwise our guys would have to do the weekend, and that's burnout city very quickly. So anyway, so we've got those positions. So we've got in the budget, we put in the numbers for those positions, assuming that we will hire them before the beginning of the fiscal year 19. We're trying to push now to fill those positions. But in all candor, we are not having very much luck at all in terms of getting candidates. We may have one secondary operator possibility, courtesy of Rob Swinarski, but at this point, our advertising program has not been effective, and we are re-looking at whether we should keep on spending money advertising since it's not working. So those positions are there. The other thing that's visible on the sheet is the water superintendent's salary was viewed as non-competitive. Basically, from the water industry perspective, it's just our current offering, which would go back to about just under 80,000 for a level 14 position in town, is simply not competitive. So
Let's put it this way, we've been advertising since the first of the year.
And we haven't
We
had
haven't
any
done an
qualified-
interview yet.
We haven't had a really qualified applicant at this point. So we put in, as a placeholder, that 92,000 came from the fiscal year, from a level 15 position. That's the best that we could estimate at this point. Make sense?
Yes, unfortunately, but
All right.
such is life.
Yeah,
Just
I've been
as-
talking to Debbie a lot about it.
Right.
About that position. I'm sure she's not mentioned it to you.
Has that new increase been advertised as yet?
No, because we
Okay.
can't advertise it until the personnel board approves it, or she says we have to go out and redo all our supervisory personnel. We have to have them all redone as far as doing the surveys and stuff from that company that did it originally back in, I think it was like 2012, 2013, something like that. So that was the answer I got yesterday. Because I went in and requested a meeting with the personnel board. And basically, and I understand where she's coming from, is we have other heads of departments that are underpaid also.
Right.
And we need to address all of them. It's not fair to penalize the people that have been here for 20 years that are underpaid because we can't fill a position that isn't filled because the position's underpaid. So let's pay our people, a more competitive wage, and that's what they're going, I guess, are you on the
Yes,
personnel board?
I was going to say, being on the personnel board, we have discussed it.
And she said
and-
that she's got permission to go out and have
Right.
the thing updated.
And I
Just
think
as
all
I
we're
got a chance
doing
to
is just
call that
trying
out.
to wait until we get over the budget season and then redo everything, because like you say, it's,
But as far as, I can only speak for myself on the board, but as soon as possible, because this we've been going now since almost, since June, end of June, without a superintendent,
Yes.
which is a big strain on our employees. It's a strain on me because I happen to be the chairman and I happen to be the one in town that can handle a lot of the extra work. And we need to address this as soon as possible so we can try to get this filled. I honestly, from what I've been hearing and around, I think that this figure is underpaid, but
One of the things that we're looking at, considering it's, once we get through the budget situation here, is to possibly, look at the job for 30 hours a week for I don't know what the right word is, a temp, a contractor, or whatever. But I talked to Deb, she said we can do it. And we'll go out and see if we can find someone that's a seasoned professional that isn't looking for a full-time and benefits and everything, so we'll just offer it as a straight 1099 type of deal. You come in, work 30 hours, 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, whatever it is, and cover the core part of the work and try and get some relief for the team.
so our employees can concentrate on what their real job is, not doing the superintendent's job.
I mean, really stepping up, I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll like
No, I mean,
all three of them, the administrative
The
assistant.
town should be aware and appreciate the amount that everyone there has stepped up.
It's running very smoothly, but it's,
It's only because everybody
To the point
is
of
doing
exhaustion.
a lot more than what their job description.
I see it on their
Says.
faces when I talk to them. They're tired.
the time.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot.
Yes.
They
That,
really-
in
I mean,
addition
it's-
to that, because of the fact that we don't have anything out there that can offer anybody to entice them to come from another town. Because why are they gonna come to Raleigh to work for less money and get less, insurance paid and da-da-da-da?
Right.
That's just what we're running through, the one that you were talking about. I've heard is not putting his application in because of that. But that's what I was told the other day. I don't know if you've been told or not. But, because I asked if it was in yesterday. And I went researching. But, so what we've done is we're hiring these laborers. Well, these laborers come in with no education at all, as far as water goes. So they have the added burden of now teaching these people that have no education in this. They go into school, teach them how to do, step by step how to do everything. And now they have to go get their licenses, because we're under the gun for the DEP too, to get people with licenses. So, that's where we're at now. We're trying to get one that's gonna be steered probably towards the distribution side, and we're hoping to find one to steer towards the treatment side. So eventually we'll have 2 licensed operators, but it's,
We may have had to grow our own. In the meantime,
Mhm.
what our primary operators want is an experienced person, because they don't, it's too much, it's an additional burden,
Mhm.
which is one of the
Right.
reasons why we really need an experienced superintendent, because they could in fact be the trainers for these guys.
Exactly. I mean,
Yes.
right now they're
At least
learning by default
And
and,
it's a tough time of year, because there's
Right.
not, in a certain sense, there's not a lot of new stuff to do. I mean, how many hydrants do you need to shovel out before you figure out how to shovel out a hydrant? I mean, so there's that kind of work.
yeah, but it's coming now, where spring's coming, so.
Anyway, the other thing on this, on the wages and salaries, is the overtime. We recalculated the overtime to try and make it more transparent as to what's happened. We kind of created four buckets for the overtime estimates: the standby, the regular scheduled overtime, which is weekend work, and then the unscheduled or emergency, where we put in an estimate, and then we've got project-based overtime, which is, we know we're going to, for example, do hydrant flushing and gate valve exercising on 133, 1A, and Route 1, and those have to be done at night for obvious traffic safety reasons. So we were able to kind of do estimates of what that number should be. It turns out that the estimate is pretty much in line with fiscal year 17. but it's significantly below the estimate that had been submitted for fiscal year 18. So that's visible on the estimate sheet. Last number, which is a surprise, is and a big jump, is in the other post-employment benefits, which now we've relabeled as, more accurately, is retirement health insurance, which we it's a pool that we essentially pay into. Every department in the town essentially does it. So the acronym OPEB, nobody really understood what it was, but now we've
I
relabeled.
noticed that they've done the same thing on the town side too.
Yes.
They've gone way up on the benefits because they were underestimating it.
Well, we had placeholders before, and so I kept on asking questions to find out what the number really was and why it was, exact to the penny from one year to the other, and it turns out that the town could put aside a discretionary amount of money for this, to cover this. And they've been, we have a portion of whatever the whole town does, and it's been systematically underestimated year over year over year. And this year we put in they've had an actuarial study done according to Sue Bailey, and they came back with new numbers, and that's where that big jump
How many-
to 48,000.
That 48,000, how many, do you know roughly how many people that includes?
I don't know how many, but it's retirees, and the
Right.
retiree number is a hard number.
Because, before, how many years before we had a water treatment plant how big was the water department? How many people did they have? They didn't have the staff of that large, right, before?
They had a superintendent, when I worked there, it was superintendent, 2 distribution and treatment workers, office worker.
We had 4 people then, basically?
Yeah. Then I believe it had gone up higher than that prior to me getting back on the board. In anticipation of the treatment plant coming online and being fully staffed.
But these are retirees, so this is not post-employment, these are actually retire. It's a pool of money that's put aside for retirees. I don't know any more than that. That is exactly how it functions and what the actuarial risks, et cetera, are.
We get the bill, we have to pay it, from the town.
Yeah.
And they get the bill from
Yeah, it's
Essex County Retirement.
fixed cost.
and
Yeah.
Maya for the insurance.
Just a couple of questions on the
Sure.
overtime, if I can go back.
Yep.
For your storm duty for the
Yep.
snow,
Yep.
is that because you're doing your own plowing and
Yep.
stuff? Okay.
And what happens is too, is we leave somebody in, because they live, with the exception of Rob, all our other employees live far away. So we have to bring them in, because if something happens at the treatment plant, they have to be, like Bob Gray stays here. Doesn't get paid for the whole time, but he sets up a little camp at the 401 Central Street.
Okay.
For the evening. But he's here, if it's a storm and he's out plowing, he's keeping the access open to the wells, and
Rob was here for the last storm, wasn't he called on to fix something?
could have been.
It was like the first storm, I think, he was on duty,
Yeah.
So, and some of this is then falls under the union contract, how much time.
Right.
So, and then, for example, if they have to work through the night, then they get overtime for the next day. For
Right.
those 8 hours, they get paid overtime.
So they get another,
Been home.
Right.
So that's
so they get another half time for those hours that would be normally worked hours.
Kind of shows up in your unscheduled.
No,
Or-
it's worked out
or-
in the snowstorm duty assumed for major events. Major event meaning that it's essentially triggers a full night's work followed by overtime the next day. So that works out as the actual number of overtime hours.
Okay.
One of the things that, with all these pluses and minuses, one of the things we discovered was that the previous estimate included, for example, 2 people on standby. And we never used 2 people on standby. We only ever used 1 person on standby. So that portion of the budget dropped.
Yeah,
significantly.
originally, the previous superintendent wanted to run basically 2 separate departments within the department. One for treatment, one for distribution.
Right.
Rowley's way too small for that. And
And our
so
guys have the licenses.
everybody's that we're going, even the people we're training, we're gonna cross-train between distribution and treatment. Joe, so that we only have 1 person on call. If something happens and they need 2 people to come in, then you call one of the other people, other persons to come in, but.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so should we proceed?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So the next thing then is we're into the expenses, and here's where Rob and Bob really helped. They were able to actually go through each and every one and re-estimate what was actually in. So you see a huge difference between the fiscal year 18 budget number and what we are putting in. And again, what you see on the worksheet, which is, what, page 4 of 9, which is this sheet. You got the right sheet. So the columns there, I put in the additional columns so that people could see how we actually built the budget. So we have the fiscal year 18 budget, and then I used the year-to-date expenses and annualized them to give a fiscal year 18 budget actual, or fiscal year 18 actual numbers that's annualized. That we essentially took the first almost 9 months of the year, and we added a third of that to get the full 12 months, except we went back through those expenses and identified which things were, one-offs, that we don't expect them
Right.
to be a recurring thing. So we kind of readjusted the numbers, so there's not an exact ratio as you go down through these, through these numbers. And then we compared that number to what the guys had said they needed, and we kind of then maneuvered accordingly. So if you look at, for example, on the alarms number, the alarms, the actual was 4,500, the budget was 2,000. Why that was 2,000, I have no idea. Our year-to-date cost is around 43. Annualized is around 4370, but there are some chunks in that, so if we actually do an estimate, it came out to 3,500. So we kind of try to be as careful as we could in terms of identifying these numbers. And always with the intent, on some of these, with the intent of kind of pushing hard against certain numbers, like our telephone bill is just way too high for the kind of the volume of, and we've got more lines than we need. We've already started negotiating with Verizon to kind of get them to consolidate the billing, because it's just too much. So. All right, so the other big change you see in chemicals, which is under the supplies, and that was budgeted previously at 58,000. The actual 17 expenses were lower than that, and then when Rob went through the estimations, we came up with a number of 30,000. Now, that's probably a bit high compared to given what our current run rate is, but we're using his estimate. I'm looking
That
down,
all depends on, this goes back to the really dry or the really wet.
Right.
and whether well,
You-
whether
you
well,
don't know.
or whether well two is working or it's not. If we have to, if well two isn't working, then we have to treat more water than we would otherwise be treating, which obviously uses more chemicals. So the other number that's significantly higher than the budget number, which is on meters, and there's a plan to replace two types of meters, and they average out 20 of them, and the average is about $500 for each of those meters. And that's line,
Yeah, they want to replace the meters that are bigger than inch. What happens is meters, when they fail, they fail into to the favor of the consumer. So the older they are, the less they spend, the less
Yeah,
revenue, the
basically
less,
they're
that means there's
frictionless.
more,
Right.
more water loss, less revenue.
unbilled water.
Unbilled
Yeah.
water. So it actually comes out on your water loss because your numbers don't match up.
Yeah,
But, so it's, like if you have gas in your house, you notice about every 5 years, they come around and change your meter.
Yes.
They do that because they don't want to lose revenue.
and there's the people who basically sell the meters have a service of offering to kind of test, essentially go in and test all the meters. And it's a kind of like a standard
Mhm.
no-fee charge. I'm always suspicious of no-fee charges, so we have to make sure that we're not replacing meters which aren't really weak, essentially. I don't recall any other of these on the supply side, any other questions, any other major changes, but if you see any and that need further explanation, by all means.
So, but there are a bunch of zeros in the actual so far for FY18, but you expect that those will eventually be spent, like,
Yes.
on the pipe and the motor service and the pump service and the,
Yes, so
Yeah,
those are,
service.
they're done on a periodic basis, and so that's one of the reasons that happens. Well, yeah, if you go down to the services, that's absolutely the case.
Hmm.
So there are services that are scheduled now that the people, they'll be coming out to do before the end of the fiscal year. And they're services that our guys can't do. So.
Right.
So I assume for warranty purposes, et cetera. So-
And I'm sure the generators are going to need service after all the use they've had.
Well, yeah, look, they are being serviced. I mean, they have been serviced, so.
what about the service, Paul? Because that seemed like that's gone up and down, up and down. Now you're saying
Well,
it's going to be
it's
30,000.
much lower, and one of the reasons there is, and again, this is when you've got really good employees, things happen, and we're trying to encourage them to ask questions. And so I think Rob asked the PAL guy, these things are really expensive. And he says, oh, funny you should mention that. PAL have been bought by another company, by Siemens essentially, and they've dropped their prices quite dramatically. And so that allowed us to, so the cost of those filters has gone down. That will show up on the capital line. But then Rob talking to the guy, he basically said, well, I don't really need to be here 4 times a year. And so what Rob wants is to be able to call them up, to have 7x24 access to them. So we've locked in that service, and then we've gone to, I think it's twice a year when they're actually visiting. And they basically spend a week here each time. We pay for all their travel and all their,
It's $45,000 a pop.
Right.
so that's a.
I noticed that the reserve that you put aside each year, the 22 or
Yeah.
20,000 was dropped.
Yes.
So,
Yep, that's why,
9,000.
because the price of the Paul filters has dropped from the 25, was it,
It was around 21,000.
no, it's down to $9,000
Wow.
is what it's dropped down to. That's what happened when they, I don't know if it's because they're mass producing them more now with the new company and more people are using them, but that's a huge drop.
Yes.
And,
And did they say that they had a certain shelf life, so they didn't
Yes.
want to stock those up?
exactly, because we originally spent the $25,000 to put one on the shelf, and just so you know that what they consider a filter for the $27,000 is actually 6 filters, I believe, 5 or 6 filters that are grouped together. And we have a set of them right now that as of a couple weeks ago when I was up there, they're in the process of switching out. I would imagine that they probably have it done by now.
Do they usually replace one of that filter every year then, or is it?
No, they're talking 10 to 15 years.
15-year filters.
So how
Yeah.
many did they have? Because I know it's been budgeted every year. So do they have like a number of these on
Well,
the
at
shelf?
20,
No.
no, there's no,
Nothing
we're
on
just,
the
we're just
shelf.
putting the money away into an article, so when it comes time to replace them, we have the money without having to spend
Makes a lot of sense.
$100,000+
The money's there. if
The
you-
money's there gradually now, is, like I said, we were putting, when they were $20-something thousand a filter, that's huge if you had to do all the filters at once. Now that they're down to what, $9,000, it's not as big of a hit, but we're still banking the
You'll have to
money
put the bank, yeah.
so that it's not a hit on the water rate users in 1 year.
Yeah,
Kind of like accruing the money
right.
Yeah.
every year, just doing an approved.
Kind of planning
It's not like
ahead.
they're just buying a filter every year.
Right.
And they
No.
basically deteriorate, I mean.
And
they
that was the
physically
original
deteriorate.
plan, but then we found out that they have a shelf life, and the shelf life was gonna
Yeah.
expire before we had a chance to put them in,
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah.
so.
So it's like a payment plan, and that, in the 6 years, when we need it, we'll have the money, we'll have put the money aside every year. Don't just buy them, and then we'll start it
That
again.
would be, you would be capitalizing it, wouldn't it be? So would you not capitalize
The ball filters?
Yeah.
It's really not a capital expense in that it's not a capital asset, it's an expendable,
Maintenance.
it's a consumable, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's not a piece of hardware that you'd sit and depreciate on the books. So you can't capitalize it because you can't depreciate the filter.
Yeah, it's like
It's a CapEx, it's not a CapEx.
an air filter on your car or something,
It's
just a lot more
A
expensive.
lot more expensive, but great question, but you
Yeah.
just can't do a CapEx on
Right, because it doesn't depreciate really from.
you wouldn't
year to year.
depreciate it on the books, it just, you buy it and consume it.
So how long is it 10 years or something?
10 to 15 years, it's gonna be a trial and error because, every type of water is a little bit different,
Yeah.
so we're gonna, but they're figuring out at least 10 years.
And how many of these Paul filters are in our system?
I forget how many there are.
Is it a lot?
It's like 5 and 5.
Yeah, there's
So-
well, like I said, each filter is each thing that's considered a filter is like 5 or 6 of
Instead
them.
of 5,
Yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
then there's a
That's
whole
kind of
bunch
in
of
the
banks of them, so
That's kind of in the technical realm, I wouldn't really wanna,
Yeah, so anyways, though, like, how long has the plant been open now? About 3 or 4
3 years?
years?
Yeah.
So let's say it's 10 years, but in 10 years, you're gonna need probably a rash of these to be replaced, but you'll have the money
Exactly,
for them.
and that's what we were worried about originally,
Yeah.
was at the expensive point, that we'd have to come up with over, hundreds of thousands of dollars to,
Yeah,
to
there
do
there are
this.
10 of them, because we were targeting,
Yeah,
we were
over a
targeting
10-year period.
220,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So each year we were gonna put aside essentially one
okay.
set.
Yeah.
Or 10% of what we needed, I guess that's it, because
Yeah.
the real issue is it's 10-year life, and we needed
I think the
10%.
first year that when you started these budgets, I think you were using $400,000 as a filter amount.
It could be, I don't know, I wasn't on the board the first year, so.
We're not,
none of us were.
we don't have enough time to go back and rebuild the
Yeah.
history, so.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your memories anyway.
Okay, let's continue on, Bernie.
Yeah, so the other thing that, there were things that when we went through this, Rob and Bob found things which had been misallocated. So a classic example, is leak detection, which previously was slotted under supplies. Well, it's not supplies, it's a
So it's
service.
actually a service.
And so we've moved that down to the correct position. If you go down onto the services, you can see the big numbers, massive numbers, is outside services. And a lot of that was essentially engineering services, that was Tater and Howard, as well as excavation.
Yeah, our emergency contractor,
Yeah,
which at
emergency
that point
contractor.
was Pike. The goal is to do the majority of it with town employees, working cooperatively with the highway department and our employees, and it's actually it's gone out to bid for that. It should be back in, I believe, next Tuesday, because we had to put an addendum on it this week, so we had to extend it for a week. But the
But
goal
so
is
that-
just to have, maybe to have them come in when we're short-handed, or if we, need a different piece of equipment or something. But
The thing here is that we're just managing Tater and Howard. We're not reliant on Tater and Howard. Our guys are good. There's a line item for engineering services that is separately broken out, but we're cutting back on the use of outside services.
they were doing things that we found out that our employees could do no problem, but those forms were filled out, and we were paying them big money to do that.
Just scanning here for other highlights.
Now, one question I had
Sure.
on, I guess it's page 5, you talk about repair and maintenance, and I assume that's the physical or the labor involved in it versus the supply line for
Correct. Yes.
the items.
Yes, so that would be TW Excavating. We now figured out that they were basically they've been basically charging us $2,000 to fix a service line break or main break. Pike previously was charging us a multiple of that. I mean, it was all legitimate in terms that TW is just more efficient, more effective, and they
Right.
show up with fewer people, and they do the job quicker and faster, and in accordance with Bob or Rob's oversight of fixing the problem. So that's all to our good.
Right, okay.
But that's all subject to change next week.
Yeah, we have to.
We had to put it out to bid because there was some challenges to our bid awarded and stuff by one of the losing contractors, so
Right.
we were advised by the state that we had to make that contract null and void and go out to bid. And we actually changed some of Bob Gray and myself went over what we were bidding out on and figured out that we were asking for a lot of things that we really didn't need because we had that equipment. So we actually shortened the list that we went out to bid on and have gone out. And like I said, it was supposed to be back yesterday, but because there was some questions on our thing and we had to give answers, so we extended it for a week and sent answers out to the different bidders.
Okay.
So next Tuesday, I believe, is what Natalie said, is what the due date.
So the other,
The maintenance water treatment equipment, is that something that?
well, this is one where we have to go with the judgment of Rob. But when something goes wrong, it's an expensive fix. So, for example, we had an incident up at the water treatment plant where the compressors, the type of oil that is used on the compressors, it had basically congealed in the compressors and had overheated, creating smoke, and the fire department ended up going up to the building, but it was essentially an oil excess oil falling.
It was spraying oil out onto the hot components of the thing and smoking, and it's a food grade oil, so it was no issue as far as contamination, and it's in a room by itself contained, so it was all contained to a room, but the whole building, I would say the whole building, the whole area of the treatment facility, excluding the offices and the lab area, were chock-a-block full of smoke. We had smoke coming out of pipes coming out of the ceiling, and it was so bad that I called mutual aid in and everything, because we didn't know what was burning in there. So we finally got in and found a compressor. We just knew there was a heavy, heavy smoke condition in the building.
So that kind of, so now you've got to replace those compressors. Well, the compressor company has kind of stood behind their product, and they've identified what the issue is with this kind of food grade oil, and we need to figure out a better lubricant, which is essentially safe to use in a water treatment plant.
In the short term, what they're gonna do is just change the oil a lot more frequently.
Right.
So it somehow, the food grade is reacting with some of the chemicals that are in the air, chlorine or whatever, in the air in the building. So we're trying to think, maybe ways we can get the outside air into that particular area. I don't know, they're working on that, so.
So the point is that number is there because if something breaks, it tends not to be a cheap fixes. For example, when the control panel of well 2 went out, that cost us $26,000 to replace the control panel. Fortunately, the insurance company
Paid the majority of it.
paid the majority of it, but we can't guarantee. The insurance company has been very good to us, so it's not quite.
Right.
So their patience may be running out in terms of.
But we had, another incident we had was, it was a electric switch, a huge electric switch that we found the wires were loose on, and it was something that was built, and it was factory made, nobody had touched it. There was a component that came from the factory, installed into the plant, and it was defective from day one, and it just, with loose wires, it was, you're talking high voltage. It just all of a sudden gave out one day and started smoking. Luckily for that, there's a redundant system, so they could switch this right over to the other system while we got the first one fixed.
Right.
And that's the same thing with the compressor too. It's a redundant system, so the compressor that had the smoking issue, we immediately shut off and started up the other compressor and put the operation back online as soon as DEP gave us the okay, which was first thing in the morning. They looked at it and they said, oh, no, there's no issue here, so there was nothing involving water, so you can go right back online.
So that estimate, I mean, just to illustrate the process that we went through, our view is we have to depend upon the integrity and the professionalism of the people who actually
Sure.
working the materials. And so Rob had gone through this, and this is essentially is his number, even though I kind of queried and tested, just like you're querying and testing us now, to make sure that number is a reasonable number. Now, whether we use all that, hopefully we don't use all of that, but we've got to build something in to kind of cover it because of how much equipment is actually up there at the water
Right.
treatment.
Well, you have a pretty good decrease in the maintenance from the previous, over 20%, so
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Well, that buys you some forgiveness, and we're trying our best to kind of keep that number. And if we don't use 55,000, and Rob has a better line of sight to what those might be, then we'll push hard to kind of get those numbers down. Because our ultimate goal is to reduce the rates. And there's no
Right.
question in my mind that we do not want to be number one in Massachusetts.
It's kind of hard when you have a $13 million bond out there.
Right.
That's where the majority of it goes.
But we're trying to either reduce the rates or hold them steady.
Right.
And by doing this kind of work, that gives us the tools we need to help manage the place.
And then even with the cross-training of the employees to both sides of this, it's cost saving
thing, and it actually gives them something to do. Some days they can work out in the street, some days they're working in the treatment plant, so.
Well, I had a discussion with the superintendent, what was her name?
Mary Beth.
Yeah, because she kept on, she said a lot of times to me that they should have, that they didn't go in the right direction, they probably should have had a sand system, we didn't really, because, the type of system that we have was over and above what was, needed, so I don't know if that's true or not, but that's.
That was,
irrelevant.
Yeah.
that's water over the dam, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, none of us were involved in that discussion, so
It's
we
irrelevant.
have to deal with with the cards we're dealt, And this is what we're dealing with. You can't reverse time.
And she's no longer here, so
Yeah.
Right. It's,
I don't
Yeah,
have the
the
facts in front of me to either say yes or no on that.
yeah.
I have talked to the engineers about it a little bit,
Yep, go ahead.
and they said that plant that we have takes out smaller particles than anything else. It's actually a very, very, very good system. But could we have got away with the other one? I don't know.
Question on this, there's a significant jump in the employee miscellaneous training. Is that because of the extra training, you expect new hires, or the people you already have in place that need additional training?
That includes, sorry, which line are you actually?
That would be 59365 on page 5.
So we've included in there, because there's essentially no other obvious place, is that includes some of the advertising.
Advertising, okay. And the training that they are required to take, do they have like some professionals that come in and train them on site, or do they take college courses?
You have to go to classes that are put on by Mass Waterworks Association and New England Waterworks Association. There's two groups that the department itself actually is a member of New England Waterworks, and myself, I am a member of Mass Waterworks, so we kind of, they both do continuing education, and to keep up your licenses, depending on the grade you have to have a minimum of 10 hours every 2 years of training. I think Rob and Bob have to do 15 or 20 hours every 2 years because they're higher licenses than the minimum.
Is that on the North Shore that you go for that, or do you do it in Boston?
Sometimes you can go to Beverly, at Beverly Water they have them. They have a whole training facility down in, I forget where it is now, down south of Boston, that New England Waterworks has.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, I've been talking with the Mass Waterworks guy that had a training, and hopefully in the next year or two, we might be getting some, because they're looking for a place in the North Shore to run training. And I talked to Chief Broderick, and because the fire station is going to have a training room that's going to can be separated off from the fire station, that we might possibly be able to hold some water classes in the North Shore there. And with that, we may be able to get some of that done, because using our facility, they'll teach some of our
Yeah.
members for free.
Plus we get dibs on whoever shows up as a potential employee.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go.
Right.
so I can remember that the redoing of the office area was for training purposes,
Oh,
Right.
but anyway. Okay, let's continue on.
All right, so, I don't think on the expense side, I don't think there's anything more I want to say in terms of the maintenance. Unless you guys have any questions. There's one thing.
Just out of curiosity, I noticed you have, a big jump in the uniform. What is the uniform?
Everybody per contract with ASME has a certain clothing allowance.
Mhm.
I
It's $800.
is that what it is? It's $800.
Right.
Plus boots.
plus boots, so I know like with us, it's $1,000,
So
so.
basically, it's $1,000, and we will have, we're targeting, we should have 6 employees, 6 line
Right.
Yeah,
employees.
so we have to,
Kathy doesn't need boots, so we're,
No, I just was curious as to what the uniform was. You know, you have a uniform allowance,
Mhm.
but what does it look like?
it's whatever.
Are you three
they-
in uniform? No, I'm just, but,
Whatever standards the superintendent sets up.
okay,
Yeah, right now, they buy their own. They've been, just have some discussions about possibly looking into a uniform company and having, uniforms come in and be cleaned. That's what they did when I was there. Somewhere since then to now, they've done away with the uniform company and they've just gone out and bought their own, the jackets and the shirts and stuff that they wear
Dickies
now.
and Carhartt kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's basically up to the superintendent what he wants for dress code, or he or she.
okay.
So it's the same as like the fire chief sets what our dress code is.
so, we move down to the other categories. We've zeroed out the capital plan, because what we intend to do, we've got a schedule of what the capital expenses we're projecting for fiscal year 19, and it's one of the schedules that you have. But all that's going to be presented at town meeting, because we're going to repurpose monies that were previously assigned to the dehumidification project, which was basically $400,000 was put aside for that, and that's more than enough to cover the capital improvements and capital expenses that are there. So that's why that line comes down to.
Yeah, when he gets done, I'll go over the articles for you.
Now, the other thing is, as we went through all the maintenance expenses, we kind of, wherever we could, it may not look like it, but what we were actually doing, and the principle I was trying to apply, and collectively we've agreed to apply, is that we would skinny things down, but then we would increase the unforeseen expense line, so that there was a cushion there. So rather than building cushion in everywhere, on every line item, which doesn't make any sense,
Right.
we increased the unforeseen expense line from 50 to 75. Now, that gives us a much more flexibility, because for example, I'm assuming it gives us much more flexibility, because, for example, the unemployment, this last year, we had two. Was it
No, we only
or
had one.
three? We only had one, but we
One.
could have had two kind of very hefty unemployment.
It well exceeded our unemployment line.
Yeah, I mean, the
Right.
10,000,
I believe it's over with now.
yeah. So we kept the unemployment, we kept the unemployment line at 10,000 on the wages and salaries, but we, along with other things, we've kind of assumed that we have the unforeseen expenses, which is exactly how we handled the unemployment this year, because it went above the budget. We'd come to the Board of Selectmen, and they would agree to, move money around to cover that, that particular item. Like well, the two examples would be when we had the overflow on Prospect Hill, we kicked in money to cover some of those expenses, and that money came out of that line.
That's the line that has to be voted by us to transfer the money out, and the selectmen have to vote on it too.
Right.
Gives you a little checks and balances. It's just not a free cash, let's put it anywhere we want, so.
So the last, the engineer return, we have really no clue really where that came from and why it was in there as a separate line. There was money returned, presumably from, a charge that they overcharged us and we got money back, but that's no longer anticipated going forward, so that line is completely zeroed out. The last line is the budgeted surplus. The budgeted surplus is essentially helps us get to zero. It zeroes out the revenue and the expenses. And when we checked the DOR regulations, this line wasn't in previously. But this is the appropriate line to have here, rather than what apparently was happening previously, not without our knowledge, is everything still came out to zero, but it was because numbers were moved around in an ad hoc
This is a
fashion,
more honest way of doing it.
confusing the bejeebers out of everybody, because there's no
Rhyme to reason
audit
to
trail.
what it was.
And so now we've kind of created the audit trail, and this also gives us an indicator as to at what point we're going to be in a position, and if we're going to be in a position, to A, determine that that number is sustainable over a 3-year period, and B, can be translated into a reduction of rates. That's our intent. We don't think that number can, if that number we think is going to fluctuate dramatically on a year-to-year basis and go zero at some point, we don't, that says you can't reduce rates. If it's going to stay at 100,000, projected out at 100,000, then that gives, now we know that we can essentially reduce.
But in this case, it's fairly obvious to everyone that can, look at it and say, you've got a excess or whatever type of a thing.
Anticipated.
Yes.
Because
rather
everything
than
is, like
swirling
we've said,
everything away that-
You don't know what's gonna happen.
And there's no reason.
But that's how you take
Projections
a,
come to pass, that would be inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
Budget's gonna be right on the money anyway, and I, like to see some of the practice used from the departments that we look at, and see, because like I maintained, I don't really know. We look at appropriations and you really don't know from one year to this, what money do they have left over? We don't know. I mean, until we have a chance to look at it after the fact,
well, that's the thing with with any of the expense budgets.
Right.
You have bills coming in until June 30th, and sometimes afterwards that were incurred before June 30th. So there's no way you can know until you've reconciled all your bills in the end of the fiscal year.
But it's good
But
to
you have a pretty good
snapshot.
idea.
It's good to have a snapshot, like you capturing the difference there, and so you see, well, this is what we actually had.
Yeah, and the worst thing, if you don't do it this way, and you just kind of hide the money in other expense lines, well, whoever owns that particular line item thinks they've got that amount of money, and they'll spend it. And we don't want that to be the kind of modus operandi, and we certainly don't want junior people to believe that that's okay to do that. We want a cost-efficient, cost-minimizing way of approaching this work, because there's a lot of money on the table. So that's why we've added that line. So that's a new line. The rest of the budget, we don't really have much control over, in terms of the paying down of the debt. There's a schedule in there which basically indicates how long we're going to be paying these things down. Some of these, the water treatment plant itself is going out, that's a 15 to 2032, I believe. So we've got a long time, those are 20-year notes, I guess. And so we've got a long time. The other ones are going to be paid off in the not too distant future. So we will have shed a fair amount of debt.
Yeah, there's some that end next year. This is the last year to pay for them.
Right.
The year after. I actually looked into, with Karen Summit, to see if we could go and take some of our surplus that we've had over the last couple of years and pay off our debt, and I was told we couldn't because it's all contracted time out. And so that was a definite no when that, but I was told it was a good idea, but no, you can't do it.
So previously, the schedule had the new water building, and I kept on wondering what the new water building was, and it turns out it's
401s and
So we try to label things up so that it's transparent, and that is going to be paid off in 2020, as will the the Pingree well will be paid off in 2020 as well.
How long is the life of this treatment plant supposed to be? Do we have an idea of how long before it might have to be?
Hopefully 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be quite longer than that.
Yeah, there's treatment plants out there that are very old, but you have to, like any, yeah,
Maintain them and take
I'm
care
sure
of
there'll be
them?
new technology 20 years from now that we'll be looking to, upgrade. We won't be, but
Yep.
So I think the other thing that this triggers is that we had commissioned the rate study from Tater and Howard. And we had pushed them hard to do some comparisons with other municipalities. What we didn't realize was that they were actually operating off of a list of capital expenditures that Mary Beth had given them. And they were under consideration, but the board really hadn't.
we actually had voted against them
Yes.
at one point. What it is she wanted, we did it planned out on water main maintenance, replacement and stuff. And our system, there are places where we probably should start thinking about replacing some of the mains. But with that being said, you're talking bonding for $1 million. And I can't see putting that onto the ratepayers now with the paying the highest water rates in the state now. What's it gonna be if we add another $1 million bond to that to start replacing some of the mains that are in water system? Ours is a relatively new system. It was put in the late 40s, and that's the oldest part of the system. So if we get to a point where we're noticing there's an area where we're doing an awful lot of leaks, then we'll be coming back and reviewing that. But for right now, at least for the next couple of years, we can't see doing that and adding more cost. We're trying to reduce cost.
So Taylor to Howard had kind of jumped all over that, because that's a revenue stream for those guys.
Yeah.
And so they pumped that into their calculations, and it was going to jump the rates by a painful amount. We would be number one in Massachusetts through the
For
end
quite a
of
while.
2100. I mean, it was going to be, so we kind of, we made some suggestions of, we told them what they needed to do to take all that stuff out and kind of reconfigure it. And then they came back with another charge to us for redoing that kind of work. And so at that point, we told them to essentially pound sand, because it was not, it wasn't really, they were basically, it looked to me like it was going to be a day's work of replugging in numbers and redoing the report. And they came back and they were charging us for 3 or 4 professional days. And at that point, there's only so much trust and faith that you have when people are doing that kind of thing. So
So the pipes, that would be probably like millions of dollars, right? If you had-
Sorry?
If you had to replace the pipes and everything.
it's $1 million a mile,
Yeah, so.
and we got 42 miles of pipe.
Yeah.
So we
And
would probably.
we have a whole report on what's in the ground. I mean, when I first got on the board, because of my knowledge of the system, before they finalized that, I went through that page by page by page and made a lot of corrections in it. And it's a pretty good report. And, eventually, we're gonna be using it to decide what we're gonna need to do for the future. But right now, I don't see the need of burdening the water users with that.
Yeah, I mean, the work that Tater and Howard, the technical work they've done, there wasn't, that's fine. I mean, there's no,
Right.
we had no questions with that. But it was, again, they had I think, an overly comfortable relationship with the superintendent. And we kind of changed to make it a very uncomfortable relationship, I
Right.
guess. but a more rigorous working relationship. I mean, they did good work on Prospect Hill. I don't think we have any issues with any of that. We have no
No.
issues with actually any of the technical work.
No, we just have issues with the amount of work that they were doing that probably should have been somebody else's job. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Do you have any idea what percent of the households use wells?
330.
And what would that be percentage-wise of the
We
customers?
have 1,800 ratepayers.
1,800, so it's about a sixth roughly,
Yeah, 14%.
14%. And did that go up dramatically when the rates really spiked several years ago, do you know, or did that
I
drive more people?
don't think so. I think,
Pretty
I
stable?
think a couple dozen people when
Yeah.
the plan
When they
came
really
out.
spiked up.
I mean, the
Probably a
issue
couple
isn't,
dozen.
the issue isn't the number of people, it's what their usage is.
Yeah.
And so a lot of some of the people who were very high users, you know, you can't blame them for switching over to their own wells, but they face, because they're heavy users, they face issues.
So now they're paying electricity, and when the power went out, they didn't have water.
And during the drought that we had, and anecdotally, what we collected was, there were about 20 houses ran dry. Had to bring in their own water. If you're in the municipal system, you know, we're connected with other towns, and there's emergency, you know, we can get potable water. But if you're on your own well and your well runs dry, you're on your own. Period. I mean, there's nothing we can do, because part of the requirements is when you disengage from the public water system is that you have to cut and cap, and you have severed all relationships. If you want to come back, the clock starts from zero, so it's a $4,000 connection fee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is not cheap to come back.
Like a dual system, if you want.
You
No,
can't,
that's
that's
not
called a
allowed.
cross connection, and that's totally, completely illegal.
You can have two, as long as you're.
There has to be
you
air
can't
gap.
mix the water from the two sources. That's,
Mhm.
so if you have our water for the house and then your well for your irrigation, that's fine, but they've got to be physically distinct and separated,
And never
physically
connect.
separated.
We did a study, we did work with the Board of Health to identify cross-contamination. We went through every day with a vendor that did all this work, and they worked with everyone. We identified cross-connections and addressed those, because that's a public safety situation.
Right.
If you have the two and you have a backflow from a polluted well, and you've polluted the public water supply. It cannot be.
That's why you're required to have the vacuum breaks on your outdoor faucet and everything,
You
because,
cannot have it touch your potable water system,
yeah,
period. There is no,
there's no turn this valve and turn this valve. It has to be completely separate, closed systems.
Okay, any other questions on the budget? Yeah, can we vote on the budget still in the joint meeting, or do we close out the joint
No,
meeting?
I think to talk to us, you have to be in the joint meeting, but do you want to go over the articles?
Sure.
All right. I don't know if you have the list of articles.
Well, it's listed out.
Capital
On this sheet,
expenses to
yeah.
be submitted as
Yeah.
articles.
exactly.
Yeah, that's what we have.
So I don't know if they correspond with my list.
Right here.
We'll talk them to you. So.
Okay, the first one I have
7.
It's like
is,
thumb opener.
Very convenient.
this is for the 3 articles for the special town meeting.
Okay.
And the first one is $90,000 for the purpose of cleaning and redeveloping well 3 and 5. Both of those wells right now are at reduced capacity because of the same reason that we have the treatment facility. The screens that are down the ground get clogged up from the same stuff that we're taking out in the treatment facility. So we had it scheduled to do Station 3 this year, and Station 2 this year was on the schedule to be done. They came in and did it and said there's nothing wrong with it, so we ended up using the money for something else that we needed to replace a pump, I think it was, or a motor, if I remember right. So that worked out good. We could put the money to something else. But, so that is $90,000, and that is coming, all these are coming out of the article for the dehumidification article we had, because we have actually found that there was another way of doing it, a lot cheaper, so now we can repurpose that money. And one of the articles is the repurposing to do the cheaper option. And
Was it total 239,000 or close to that amount?
No, the dehumidification project was like 460,000.
yeah, we've already spent some money for engineering. So the next one that's gonna be on the special is $20,000 for the purpose of installing the pipe, the insulation on the piping, which is the solution, so we're talking a $20,000 solving the problem as opposed to almost $500,000.
And some background in case you're going, what the hell? Turned out that there was an air vent that was open and blowing in hot air. I won't say purposely, but there was hot air being blown into the treatment facility when we went in there to see what was going on. And that 55-degree water, having 80-degree humid air hitting it, almost made it like it was raining in there.
Yeah.
So the first time we walked through, nothing added up, and this board kind of just said, you know, this just doesn't seem right. And so we got the article passed, we thought we really needed to do our homework and do some more investigating, and we did, and let's just say we found out that, you know, didn't need to be so, and we made some adjustments.
The problem was a lot less last summer, we'll just say. Enough so that if we put insulation in, it probably won't be a problem at all.
But again, the secret there, I think, is, I mean, even while Mary Beth was here, we developed relationships with Rob and Bob. So we were talking to them, and they would kind of drop hints, etc. So we kind of put stuff together, and we basically forced a more formal walkthrough of the plant, and that was, I think, one of the, we've discovered that had been kind of managed, so it made it look moister than it really was. And so
The Irish have a word for it, shenanigans, and I'll leave it at that.
So is it a matter of leaving things open, doors open?
Yes.
You can get hot air coming like that, is that right?
No, the
Yeah,
thing
it's
is
all
that
speculation,
we have
so-
a solution to it, which
Right.
is a lot less
Oh,
expensive than the
Originally,
humidification.
there's a cross ventilation system in there that's a power ventilation system that isn't designed to be used in the summer humid times. It's designed to be used in the fall and the spring and stuff. And originally,
and emergencies.
yeah, in emergencies, like we used it the other night to get all the smoke out of the building, it was
Right.
awesome. But
It was
I guess they weren't trained properly by the contractors or whoever would come in, that wasn't supposed to be on, and that's why it originally started happening.
We also had an engineering firm come in as part of this and evaluate it and make the recommendations for the 4 portable units or the big solution that we asked for, and they never pointed out that situation.
No.
either. I'll
No,
leave it
not at
that.
all.
So then, it was actually Smith and Wesson, the guys who originally did the design, they came in and they said, well, why are these fans going? And I said, well, that's what we thought they were
Yeah.
there to do.
So-
And that was the source of the problem.
No, the thing is, you have a solution to it,
Yep.
and it's a lot less.
Yep,
and,
exactly.
Let it go at that.
Yep.
What's the next
The
item?
next one is, if you remember right, we had an article for the heating and air conditioning system at 401 Central Street, and anybody that's been to our meetings in the summertime know that we have no air conditioning in the meeting hall, and we have very inadequate wall units.
And a lot
We-
of glass.
And a lot of glass, and I don't think in the original, I don't know where the original $18,000 came from.
It was an article.
No, I mean, as far as where that figure estimate came from, I don't know.
The superintendent put
The
it forth.
superintendent gave us that as an estimate, and I kept saying to her, "You sure that's enough?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, that's what they tell me." Well, we went out to bid and we found out it was closer to $40,000 to do that. So we're asking for a transfer from the same article to install the HVAC, and we're doing that on the special town meeting so we can get it done before the summer, so we don't have to go through another summer. In addition to that, the heating is very inadequate too. It's got electric heat, baseboard heat, and they're in there in the wintertime with winter coats on and space heaters, which is not a good situation.
No.
So we called a contractor in. We went under Combis, found a contractor that's under the state bid, that has, is very familiar with the prevailing wage. And we had them come in and they completely went through the building, had all their subcontractors come in, and they come up with a proposal of approximately $40,000 to do that. So that's where the other $22,000 comes in.
You need it.
So we gotta take care of our employees. They're taking care of us. Now the next articles are for the annual town meeting. We're looking for $60,000 to purchase a new F-350 utility truck. The 2009 F-350 utility truck is about done with its usefulness. We try to keep a 10-year turnaround on our vehicles, and obviously 2009 truck is 10 years old. That's a bid from the same thing, through state bid, same as all the other departments do, through Combis, MHQ. The next one is a $30,000 amount to hire an engineer to do plans and try to investigate what the situation is at the bottom of Prospect Hill. Back in the mid-'80s, they put in the new water tank and never took out the pipes for the old water tank. And even when I worked there, in '93, the people that worked for the department didn't know what was in the ground there, and now it's even worse. So there's gates here that they don't even know turn on what or turn off what. So we need to be able to either take out some of the old stuff, put in some new stuff at the bottom of the hill, because that's the main entrance of water to our system. And if the gates don't work, we could be in trouble. So what we're looking for now is to get the $30,000 so we can have, between our employees and the engineers, can go down and possibly do some digging and tracing of pipes and whatever else needs to be done to draw up plans for down there. So we know exactly what each gate does and doesn't do, which ones work, which ones don't. So, and Rob got a guesstimate from the engineering firm from Tater and Howard of approximately $30,000 to do that. So the next one is the usual, add to the fund for the Paul filters. Obviously, it's gone down because the price of Paul filters have gone down by about a third. Number 4 is we're looking to buy a plow for our backhoe. The long dirt roads, to plow them sometimes, it'll be a lot easier with a backhoe than it is with a truck getting stuck. Other things you can use it's a lot easier when you're clearing out hydrants to hit it with a plow on a tractor than it is to go around with a bucket on it, but it'll be interchangeable, so they can do whatever they need to do with that. So they asked for that, and I think it's a good use.
And it will be available, we'd make it available to the highway department
Yeah.
as well, so that
All our equipment goes back and forth. We use theirs, they use ours.
Right.
As you notice, you'll probably see on Central Street, the water department trucks doing the plowing on Central Street and Weathersfield Street. our new one we just got last year. So. And that's it. And we're looking, like I said, to transfer that out of the sum from the dehumidification article.
Okay.
So what about those, some of those items that you have, if they approve all those on the articles, wouldn't that have an impact on our rates too, for, you know, I mean.
How do you mean? Negatively impact or positively?
No, I mean.
Because right now, the money is sitting in the bank, so it's already there, it's been designated for something else, we're
Yeah,
just
they're
repurposing it, so we don't have to put it on the
That's not
tax
my
rate.
question, so that is.
So we don't have to put it onto the rates. We can do these capital expenditures without it costing the ratepayers
So that
any
was-
more money.
That was part of that savings you mentioned that
Right.
we got for the $400,000 that we don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, okay.
With the article passed last year at town meeting, we just, and as things developed, we're like, we just want to do due diligence, do extra work, and as we did and peeled it back and did more discovery, we're like, you know, we weren't comfortable and everything panned out the way it did. So now we've got these things that need to be done, and we're saying instead of going for more articles, just repurposed the money that was already appropriated, raised and appropriated.
Okay.
So it's already been raised and appropriated, it's sitting there.
So the 240,000 for these 7 articles, is that reflected in the regular budget, assuming that the articles are going to be passed, or is this over and above?
No, because they're articles, so the
They're
articles are
articles.
different.
Yes, over above.
Articles are entity of themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we weren't repurposing money, it would be pulled
We'd have to-
basically from our.
Stabilization.
We'd have to
Stabilization.
appropriate it
Right.
somehow.
So we pulled the money, in previous years, or in fact, some of this money previously was pulled from the stabilization fund. And the stabilization fund is in pretty healthy shape because the free cash from, that's being moved into it this year is a fairly sizable amount of money as well. So it's uncomfortable to kind of keep that fund building and building, which is, because that's the ratepayers' money. And unless we've got a plan for using it,
Mhm.
we should essentially make sure that that stabilization fund is of a size that reflects its label, which is a stabilization fund.
So how much is the free cash amount?
Sorry?
Right now?
So round, well, it's essentially about 600,000.
The stabilization fund.
No, it's more than 600, but the free cash
Yeah.
was 600,000 from last year.
But that going forward with the revamp of the budget will allow us to much more tightly control that, you know, which is good for the ratepayers because we'll have a better handle on the revenue, the expenses, and then going forward, and as Bernie said, you know, one of our big things this year is going to be to look and see what effect we can have on the rates.
That, and I have the employees working on future capital expenditures, planning down the road, what's coming up, what needs to be done. Like this $30,000 for the bottom of the hill is just the planning stage of a project for the bottom of the hill,
Right.
which is gonna have to be engineered and straightened out, because it's a royal mess down there, so. I know we can't take the old tank out, but we can take some of the old piping out.
It's a risk to the system, and it's something that we identified as a risk.
Yeah,
It was like with the tank, you know, the spalling on the tank, it was a risk.
Mhm.
You know, we identified it and just, you know, it's gotta be done. It's one of these things that, you know, from a transparency standpoint, we're saying to folks, listen, this is a problem. It's not a problem today, but it's a time bomb waiting to happen. So, we're spending the money to do the right thing and address this. So, that's what it's driving.
So the free cash for 2017 was $653,179.
So part of that is being flattened out now because the budget, you know, decreased over $300,000 now.
The reality is that a lot of that free cash is being generated because we had budgeted for positions which were never filled. So to the extent that with those positions, God help us if they stay unfilled, but if they stay unfilled, then that will be adding to the $60,000 which I've got as a budgeted surplus as well, and that's where that's coming from.
We're being very aggressive at trying to find people, but we're not having much luck. You know,
But we've got a budget for the,
we can't not budget for those positions, and then all of a sudden we find somebody next fall, and then we have to wait for another town meeting to actually budget the position. Then we're gonna lose the person if,
but
you know.
equally, the state is expecting us to have secondary operators in those positions. So we're on forbearance at the moment because we're trying to do it. And they
Good.
know what the market's like across the state, so they understand that.
It's not unique to Rowley. Bob Gray and myself went to Mass Waterworks, they had a seminar on this whole subject, and we went and got into groups and did group sessions, and Bob was in one group and I was in another, and both of us came back with the same answers, that everybody there was in the same position we're in, is
Right.
the market right now, if you have a water license, they're looking for you. All the different towns are looking for, the supply is not meeting the demand, we'll put it that way.
You're in a very tight labor market, and then with the skills that you need, they're very, very limited.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like somebody goes to college to become a water person.
Yeah.
They,
Specific skills.
I mean, when they hired me back in '93, I was a carpenter. And I came here, and then they started teaching me, you know, the two other employees started teaching me. They sent me to classes. I took tests, and I ended up being, you know, the distribution 2 and a treatment 1, and then I transferred over to the fire department, so that's where I didn't go up any higher on my licenses, but I would have if I stayed, you know, and then when you get to that point, you gotta understand too, is most people that are licensed operators, that's how they get them. They start out as laborers, and then they work their way up. And now that they've got their licenses, now they're 5-6 years into working for the town. They've got 3 or 4 weeks vacation. They're up on the pay scale. Most towns have more of the insurance paid than we do. So then we turn around, and when we hire somebody, we have to start up the way the town's set up right now. We have to start them off at the bottom scale. No vacation. You know, no sick days. You know, you just want to, you know, just have to start building all that stuff up again. And that's not. I mean, we have a great guy right now that's working at the treatment facility, and we try to entice him to come over full time from his other job, and he's got so much time into his other job, we'd have to start him off at the bottom.
There should be a way around that, because...
There should be, but I keep getting turned down when I come.
I work for the state, and, you know, I worked in the professional arm of it, and they call what they call recruitment pay, so you don't have to start off from the bottom.
Yep,
You can start...
that's something
I've
that the
had
town
people
needs to
start off
adopt.
even close to the top, you know?
Mhm.
And they should have that in, you know, I'm surprised they don't.
But
Well, I mean, for the people that are looking at it, it would be pretty easy to justify. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's time to...
Can we vote on the budget?
Okay.
I second that.
we already voted on it, so they have to vote on it. We just have to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we approve the water department budget.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we approve your
I'll
budget.
entertain a motion to adjourn
I make the motion to adjourn the joint meeting.
Seconded.
all those in favor by roll call vote.
Aye, John Manning?
Hi, Bernie Cullen.
Aye, Mark Emery. Now it's your turn.
I make a motion to adjourn the joint meeting?
They need...
Say your name.
No, no, I'm making a
No,
motion.
motion.
I need a second.
Oh, okay.
right.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay. I, Sharon Emery.
Hi, Larry White.
I, Paul Jello.
I, Peterson Solo.
Okay.
Okay.
Joint meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank
I hope it kept you laughing and entertained.
No, it's a good.
It was a very good
You can